Good morning and welcome to Morning Java, brought to you as always by our friends at the Get Go Cafe and Market, where they are currently offering curbside pickup. You just order through the app, that's the Giant Eagle app, and roll down the window and wait, and they just bring it out to your car. Can't beat it.
I was in favor of less human interaction before this all started, so this is just music to my ears.
There you go. Let's talk about human interaction here. I want to throw out a scenario for you here. Brian Reynolds walks through Market Square. He's not wearing a disguise. He's not wearing a uniform or anything else here. Who stops him?
I mean, probably nobody, but not nobody. Somebody would spot him. But in fairness, Brian Reynolds has that, Lawrenceville, microbrew owner look to him also. So I think that's kind of working in his favor. Not working in his favor, but I get the point that you're trying to make here.
Well, I've made the point a lot in the past few months. It started when I was doing a full radio show, one of the full 3 hours for Mark Madden. And I got so tired of everybody just calling about the same Pirates topics again and again and again. And I finally just started asking these people, have you ever heard of, can you name the Pirates left fielder? And it's different when you do it on live radio than on social, because on social, they have a chance
to Google it.
Just Google it. Yeah. Pirates. Okay. LF Pirates. Okay. Yeah, there it is. It's somebody named Brian Reynolds. So it's Brian Reynolds. But when I was doing it on the radio, they couldn't do it. They would call up and talk about how angry and how passionate they were about the Pirates and how their hearts were broken and everything else here. But then when I would just name the left fielder, there was this awkward and yet beautiful dead silence. What is this? Who are these people? Why do they claim to be so invested in the Pirates and yet don't follow them?
I mean, outrage is fun. It sells. I mean, people don't get what's going to hit, a piece of someone being really angry, or someone like, here is a well thought out and well constructed, argument versus no, it's ball bomb nutting,
Yeah, but you're looking at from the media perspective. I'm not. I'm looking at it from the listener, in this case, perspective. People love to be mad.
Yes, and that's an outrage sells. Outrage sells. People want to consume outrage, and that's part of the problem. And that goes against someone in Brian Reynolds' favor who is almost boringly good. There's nothing extremely flashy about him. He's just going to go out there, hit 300 whatever with good power and good defense, and it's like, oh well.
I think you were with me at PNC Park when we had Ben Cherington at the table, and I think me and you were sitting off to one side, and he had a bunch of reporters around him, and he started saying that, all guys go through streaks and slumps. And I actually interrupted him and said, not Reynolds. And he goes, not Reynolds, because that's exactly how boring he is. He never stops hitting. There was a guy who came at me on Twitter. I just retweeted a quick video of Andrew McCutchen, who's been working out in Clearwater, which is, of course, the Phillies complex in Florida. And he's hitting home runs, and it was fun. It was just a fun thing where Kutch said, what a nice sound. Alex, like the first 3 or 4 responses underneath that immediately were, what a ridiculous trade. How could they get rid of this guy and everything? And I'm going, do you know who they got for him in that trade? And there's this long lapse until finally maybe somebody looks it up, or one guy, to his credit, at least acknowledged that he had no idea and just said, it's just a bad trade because Kutch is gone. I swear there's just not a lot of thought being put into this anymore. It's just outrage for outrage's sake.
Yeah, I can't add any more on to it besides outrage for outrage's sake, because outrage sells. And you know what? Maybe if I could add something constructive, maybe people will lump those Garrett Cole and Andrew McCutchen trades together since they happened within 48 hours. Maybe, and one was legitimately, quite possibly, Neil Huntington's best trade, and the other one being his second worst trade as GM. So you remember the bad stuff a lot more than you remember the good.
You do, but and I think in this case, though, I really think that what's happened here, and I'm not saying critical there are no critical things to say about Bob Nutting, the ownership, certainly not of the previous front office. I'm not being a dummy here. I just think that if you're gonna say that I am so into this and so passionate and I love the Pirates and everything, and you can't acknowledge that Brian Reynolds exists. How are you trying to have it both ways, you know?
It has instant credibility without putting any effort into it, or the illusion of instant credibility.
Let's talk about the curious case of Colin Moran. And it is a curious case because he's a guy that his defense speaks for itself, and I don't mean that in a good way. He can be a butcher out there, especially with the footwork. And he also has kind of that Adam LaRoche body language that might rub some people the wrong way, the way Roche did when he was in Pittsburgh. Even though he's absolutely a max effort guy, he has that kind of slow look to him, and he might rub people the wrong way. I thought he had a good offensive year in 2019. What about you?
See, I wouldn't go that far. I think he was okay, and it was okay in a mostly platoon role. So that kind of is a point against his favor. Like, okay, these are the at-bats that, you should be optimized for, and you only came out with as a pretty average hitter, grand scheme of things. A lot of RBIs, which are really good, but in terms of actually on-base slugging percentage, eh. He intrigues me, though, because I think that platoon might have worked, against him. Clint Hurdle was dead set on using that for him. And talking to him in spring training, it's like, he's a guy who really values consistency. That, he could go up, wake up at the ballpark, and know he could do this, get 4 bats, get through that. That's whenever he thrives. And you don't really get that whenever you're a platoon, because you might face a lefty starter and then you're sitting. You might have a lefty reliever come in and you're getting pinch hit for in the 5th or 6th inning. There's a lot of stuff like that kind of worked against him, I think.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that wasn't his fault. I mean, Clint would say one thing and then do another. Clint would insist to us repeatedly. I brought it up with him myself that he does not see Colin Moran as a platoon guy, as a guy who wasn't going to be able to face lefties. We've seen his history against lefties. I can picture Clint saying it right now. Actually, one time in Denver where he got really defensive about it. We've seen his splits against lefties. We know he can hit lefties. He's hit lefties his whole life. Okay, but then the lineup card would come out and he wasn't in it. I guess the part where Colin Moran was able to get a lot of respect from Rick Eckstein and from his teammates in particular, and you referenced it, was RBIs. I know RBIs and the concept of clutch ends up being mud when it comes to certain advanced analytics, but the fact of the matter is that the people who play the game, their voice and their thoughts kind of count. And if you're able to go up in difficult situations and have good at bats, that means your head is still in the game. You're not overwhelmed by the situation. And we saw Colin Moran come up in not just the opening day grand slam and stuff like that we remember, but we saw him come up multiple times and become a guy who would break a rally out. You know what I mean? He was the guy that you would want up at the plate. Some of that's mythology, but some of it's also real. For Moran to have that trait is a good thing. I really believe that. I'm with you that we also saw not the greatest level of consistency. Moran once got pretty, I don't want to say ticked off. He's not the type to get super ticked off, but he kind of tilted his head at me once when I brought up that he has a longer swing, and he really didn't like that. He does not see his swing as being long. I don't know how he doesn't. I'm not going to play Rick Eckstein with that. But he can get it out of sorts at times, and it doesn't look particularly great. But I agree with you. His consistency needs to be there. Is there any hope for him as a starting third baseman, an everyday third baseman in the National League?
You know what? I think he might have a better shot as a National League DH, which might be coming through, because Brian Hayes, he's on the doorstep, and he's going to need to get reps in 2020, or if there is no season, 2021. It's almost Brian's job at this time, which leaves Moran as a man without a position. He could fill in at third, he could fill it at first. Uh, but then
So
again,
don't get people irrationally excited here. I mean, does Hayes actually have a chance to play third base this season for Pittsburgh? I know there's no Indianapolis. I'm not being dumb here.
Yeah. I mean, that definitely is going to be a point in his favor. And I don't know if, that means Cabrian's going to be ready opening day or they keep him in the taxi squad waiting for a little bit. But he's at the point of his career where he needs at-bats. And he just put in a whole year at AAA. And he was looking good at spring training. And he was doing things in spring training with Rick Eckstein that were really – they were working on that swing. He was getting lift on the ball.
He stung the ball, and he was getting it up in the air.
He stung the ball all year in AAA. He stung the ball all year in all spring training. His problem was he couldn't get it in the air, and now he was making those adjustments to get it in the air. He needs to be with Rick Eckstein every day right now. That's the point of his career where he needs to be.
But there's two ways to do that, theoretically anyway, with whatever version the baseball season ends up taking in 2020. And one of them is to have him, like you said, on that taxi squad where he's kind of just hanging around, but he's not competing. He's not on the 30-man active. I'd rather see him active. I want to see this guy playing ball. And I don't care about burning the year of service time. I'm sorry. I just don't. I don't think he's that precious. This is not an Andrew McCutchen or a Garrett Cole where you're holding your breath going, oh, no, we can't burn a year of service time. Get him up and get him playing. Remember, the big worry about Brian Reynolds last year early on was, oh, no, service time. And then all Brian Reynolds did was just keep hit. He's the left fielder, by the way, for anybody who isn't paying attention. But all Brian Reynolds did was keep himself in Pittsburgh. He talked about it openly at the time. I shouldn't say openly. It was kind of off the record or whatever. He's like, they're not sending me down. I'm not going to let them send me down. All I'm going to do is just keep hitting. And he did keep hitting. Let's see that from Brian Hayes. Let's see it from Cole Tucker. It doesn't require a youth movement or a rebuild or whatever label anybody wants to attach to it. These are guys I think who are ready to contribute right now. As long as we're isolating on individual players with this episode, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up a personal favorite, Jose Osuna. I like what I've seen of him in the field for a dude who is built like a middle linebacker and actually is more built like a middle linebacker now than ever before because he really started cutting it. I couldn't believe him when I saw him in the spring. Now, Jose was already a really strong guy, and we saw that reflected in his offense. When he hits, it's a loud sound off the bat. I'd like to see more of this guy. I'm sure that his career trajectory is aiming toward the bench, but that doesn't mean he can't play more. And you know what I'm about to bring up? It doesn't mean he can't DH. Why not?
Colin Moran and Jose Osuna is a DH platoon. Let's just ruin that whole everything. It's all.
You didn't say, but you said Moran. I did. Jose can hit righties. Jose can be your DH. But yeah, if you split the two of them, Moran and Osuna as DH, you can work Josh Bell into that mix to make sure you're spelling him and maybe theoretically or actually improving your defense at first base, improving your defense at third base. I'm okay with it. I just want to see more Jose. I want to see Jose get at bats. I think there's more there.
And for the record, the Moran Osuna platoon was mostly a joke, but there's a kernel of truth in every joke. What really impressed me about Jose last year was coming off the bench.
Ice cold. Not just cold. Ice cold. He'd come in after sitting on the bench for 3 games and not being active. And he worked. I'm sorry, I'll let you finish here, but I saw him running up the tunnel and getting his extra swings in during games. He was doing whatever he could to stay fresh. Ice cold. And whether he got the result or not, he would produce a high quality at bat, a high quality plate appearance every time.
See, I was going to bring up that point. Like he prepares for that pinch hit at bat so well. He watches starters well. He gets those extra swings. Whenever he gets up there as a pinch hitter, he might not always get a hit, but you know what? He's probably the most prepared person on that bench to take that swing right there. And it's 100% not fair to, relegate a dude to a life of pinch hitting just because he really excels at pinch hitting.
Yeah. So I telling somebody, you did a good job washing the windows, so for now on, you're our window washer. Yeah. Oh man, I'll do a crappy job next time.
Yeah, but as a starter, it's kind of the opposite of Colin Moran, who I think is someone who did a good job learning from his at-bats. And that second and third time you saw little improvements. Jose, I think, I think Jose is someone who that first at-bat is his best at-bat in a game.
It has to be. It has to be. And you never saw Jose rest on the idea that I've got to have 4 or 5 plate appearances a day in order to find my groove. And look, again, I can respect that. I think there's value in that. Pinch hitting in general under a universal DH is not going to be as significant. I think that's something else that we also have to get used to here, that the Pirates bench composition, now having a Luke Maile on the bench doesn't seem all that big a deal. You don't really care that much that he is a 200 or 211 hitter. You do care that you have defensive options there, to swing back to the previous segment, that you have a Ke'Bryan Hayes. You might have Will Craig. We'll see how that works out here. I'm not a believer in his offensive numbers, despite the home runs in Indianapolis last year, but I'm definitely a believer in his Gold Glove. I'm definitely a believer when people say that he's the best defensive first baseman. Well, okay, best defensive first baseman in the system is not the highest praise.
Yeah.
Okay, but look, but he's an option. Okay, and if you have gloves that Derek Shelton, who comes from the Twins organization and believes in and practices doing things the right way. I know everybody believes in doing things the right way, but if you come from the Cardinals or the Twins, then you also lived it and breathed it. There are organizations that do things better than others. The Twins have been built forever and ever on playing the game correct fundamentally in all aspects. Maybe he'll prioritize those defensive guys. Alex, what do you think? I don't know.
I mean, if there is a DH and it's looking like, the National League will adopt one at least for 2020, then you need that versatility more than you need, someone who could come off the bench and really have power. That doesn't mean that, there's no spot for Jose Osuna, because like you said, he can play first base, he can play, a little third base, fill in the outfield, which might actually be really important this year since there are only 5 true outfielders on the 40-man. And, Gregory Polanco doesn't exactly have the greatest, build or history with health, and he might be just DHing a lot anyway, so they could be thin in that regard. There's playing time for a lot of guys like this, but I think you do have to prioritize, the pitching to make sure that you have, multiple guys who can play X position, 3 guys who can play shortstop, or 3 guys who can play first base. Basically anything besides catcher. But ideally, you would have a third stringer.
Yeah, and this is why I keep coming back to Jose here, because he can offer you both of those things in some capacity. He's never embarrassed himself in the outfield. He has the most. People aren't going to believe this. He actually has the most accurate throwing arm from the outfield of anyone. Not the best throwing arm, not the hardest, but where he wants it to go, it goes. Clint Hurdle and his staff were blown away by his ability to find a way to just drop a ball into a bucket from 300 feet. That means something. That means he's going to keep the runner at the base where he needs to be. I just want to see more Jose. I can't make it any clearer than that, Alex. I just want to see more Jose.